officially to tell us. Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
Here we are again, buddy.
Rock
Here we
on.
are again. We've,
Yes.
a couple more weeks that we took off because of conflicting schedules. We're back. Is it a couple weeks? I thought we had. I thought it wasn't that long between the.
No, I
between our
think
recordings.
we were gonna record, but you had sick kids. That's what it was.
Yes.
That's what it
Children.
was.
That's what's awful. Is
Yeah.
being responsible for little humans. You know.
Yeah, it's not fun when they're big either.
How was your trip to the Mohegan Sun?
Trip was good. We did 2 days in Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
We saw Zoe's dream was to see Beetlejuice on Broadway,
Oh, okay.
and Mo got us we were 5 rows back from the stage.
Are you kidding?
No,
So it
no.
must have been on cloud 9.
Oh, she was. She was.
Yeah.
And
Okay, good.
so she had the whole Broadway experience, and then we all walked, left the theater district, walked down to Hell's Kitchen, and got dinner afterwards. So that was good. First day there, we bopped around New York City and ate the good foods and shopped at the stores they wanted to hit and did all that jazz.
All right.
And then we went out to Jersey to Jason, our art dealer's house. I rented a car.
You rented a car.
Yeah, because Jason's car was Jason, Mo, and her daughter, and all the essential sequential luggage.
Oh, sure.
So we needed a car for me and Steph and my kids and our luggage. I was just looking at the frame, and I saw your dog in the background, and I was looking at the frame thinking I was you. I was like, "There's a fucking dog in my office."
So are you high right now?
No, I'm not. But I smoked a hell of a bunch of weed while on the trip. for the most part, I was high all day.
Lingering a bit is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, it is. I am on Operation Clean Up, Shawn now.
Detox, Shawn.
Yeah, I went to cryo this morning. Went to the gym, sweated out as much as I could, sat in the hot tub, and I'm just going to be doing that every day and not indulging in much of anything else.
Are you getting back into the art, or what are you doing? What do you do with your typical 8 hours? Are you starting to get back into the swing of things?
Oh yeah. Tomorrow's my day. My day after trip is a day to get everything back, unpack, do laundry, food shop, all that shit.
Yeah.
So that's all pretty much done. So tomorrow morning I'll probably go to cryo in the gym in the morning instead of the evening, but then I'll do my emails and then I'll get down to drawing. Yeah, tomorrow.
Okay. Yeah, my day outside of my 9 to 5 job is typically around, and I have to be as you can schedule your day. You can schedule being disciplined effectively, but the effectiveness of your art often can sometimes derail that schedule, right? There are plenty of times when I'm sitting here kind of like, okay, it's a Tuesday or whatever day it is, I've got to get X amount done for whatever it is that's on my plate.
Right.
And man, sometimes that groove doesn't hit you at all, or just generally something will get in your way.
Right.
And it's so hard to get back into the swing of things. Do you have any sort of mechanisms that help that along?
When I get back from a trip, I schedule myself an ease in period where I'll give myself more time than I need to complete the task that I would at hand. So
yeah,
if it's thumbnailing a composition for a cover, I might give myself an entire day for that, because that allows me to play and get back in the groove and futz around till it hits me.
Yeah.
And so that kind of works. I used to when I was on deadlines, I would come in and I would just have to jump right back into it. And I guess I'm a bad person to ask that question, because I would just force myself to work.
You're awful.
And I'm trying to find healthier ways of doing that. That's why I'm always asking you about it.
As if I'm the true north of the Sherpa.
Yeah, I'm not saying you're the true north, but you're better than I am. So So I figure there's something to learn there.
I got what is my process of getting back into it? Oh, speaking of, you were before we get into that, you spoke earlier about the somebody had mentioned that some of the sound in the opening wasn't working, and that's completely on me. I don't know which button to press when it comes to StreamYard. But also, what kind
Yeah.
of other feedback have you been getting from the people, from the public?
People are loving it. Most of the feedback I get is people are really enjoying the conversations we're having, are glad we're talking about the things we're talking about, are feeling people aren't talking about that stuff enough.
Yeah,
And I'm getting some a lot more engagement in terms of comments since
yeah.
we started doing it. So generally, people really, really enjoy it.
Okay, good. Because when it's funny, somebody had commented, I can't remember where I had the comment from, but they said like, "Hey, when I'm visiting your streams, when I'm streaming on my own, I often come off as like ultra professional and you know what I mean, all the stuff that I typically do, right, when I'm
Yeah,
streaming." But when they said like it's nice to see that you and Shawn just kind of like joke around a lot. So
yeah,
there's a side of you that people often don't get to see because you and I are joking around
right.
so much, right? And I'm
Yeah,
like, oh, I never thought of it that way. I just thought,
yeah. It's
oftentimes
good.
I use this conversation for just like catching up with phone calls. There's things that I omit, obviously, because if I lay in too hard with things that piss me off, right, people get very, very upset with that. But
Right.
I treat this like a regular phone call just for us to get caught up. I ask you about a show, I ask you about your family.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's always been, as far as my podcast goes, always been the tenor of it.
Yeah,
People aren't. Um, I don't know. This isn't. People aren't concerned with being absolutely focused and professional. Not that it's
right.
unprofessional, but it's just it's more casual. It's
Sure.
more real.
Well,
So
yeah, one of the things about this podcast back in the day, I remember you'd walk in with a, what would you have? You'd have whiskey in hand,
yeah, yeah. I mean,
right? It
yeah.
helped loosen people up.
Yeah, I liked that. I mean, it
Well,
was
it's mostly
nice.
for you, you drunkard.
It's nice to. I mean, that's kind of where it came from. I like. I knew like when I sit down and have a drink with someone, we always have a good talk, and it's like your guard is down, and it's not even that the alcohol itself is doing that to you. It's the training your mind that when you're having a drink, you're in a relaxed mode to
Mm,
speak freely. I think is more of it because I mean, if anyone was getting a buzz, it was towards the very end of an episode. It
right.
wasn't at the
Because it wasn't
beginning.
like you were starting 15, 20 minutes ahead of time. You were, well, no,
Right.
sometimes you would be. You bunch of, I swear to God, the people that you keep company with, I question each and every single one of them. One, because they don't have like the presence of mind to realize they're hanging out with you and just be like, this might not be the best use of my time. Not you as a person, but like you as a podcast. You know what I mean? You as a content creator. And then
I
two,
don't
like,
offer much.
no, not you. I mean, not you as Shawn, but you as a. Anyway, let me skip over that part. The part that are like they see alcohol and they go like, maybe this isn't the kind of thing that I should indulge in right now. This is a convention. This is I'm supposed to be upright tomorrow, and if I get too deep into this, I might not be as upright. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But
But they do it anyway. So again, I
yeah, well,
just sometimes.
I've had a few guests. Um, I guess you could say maybe we're a tad.
You're belligerent, is what
No,
you
no,
you really.
regretful at what some things they'd said. So there are a handful of episodes I've never aired for that very reason.
Really?
Uh huh.
Out of courtesy to that individual.
Yeah, I promised anyone if you had a problem with it, I wouldn't air it because I'm not doing this to like have like gotcha moments. But
Ah,
you know,
let's do the gotcha podcast. You know what I mean?
I've
Let's
got some
just
gotcha
air.
moments.
Woo.
I just they didn't want them to come out.
You're a good guy. You're a
One
good
was
guy.
Dan. Dan, we recorded 3 episodes before I could do one that he was okay with.
Well, listen, Dan's a garbage human being, so I think
He
that
was just wasting my time. I told him I wasn't going to do it again
yeah,
if this one didn't meet approval.
he just could not. I think he just can't keep his alcohol under control.
We weren't even drinking. I wasn't
So you
one
just
time.
it's
The
just like
one
off
that
the top of
aired,
his.
we were drinking. The one that aired was the one we were drinking.
So somehow drinking put inhibitors back on to Dan.
Yeah.
I don't know about that guy sometimes. You know, one of these days, the three of us should do this.
That's one of the comments I got, and I was gonna bring that up tonight. I think
We
we
should do
should
it.
invite Dan in on this.
Yeah, I just spoke with him 2 or 3 days ago. We were chit chatting about. Oh gosh, I can't remember, but I give him such a hard time because he's a very well accomplished dude, but he's never going to be the last person to tell you about it. Oftentimes he'll be the first person to tell you about it, you know.
Right.
So he's done so much with his career. He's done so much growth as a not just as an illustrator, as an artist, but also just as the complete package. But he's keenly aware of it, and there's 0% humble in the guy, you know.
Right.
So
right.
if at any point he just I just saw him do an interview with Perch, and I reached out to him.
What's
and I
Perch?
said, hey Dan, Perch, Comic by Perch is like a really popular YouTube channel.
Oh, okay.
And I said, hey Dan, congratulations on, this Perch thing. Who the hell do you think you are? Like the writer of Slots. By the way, Slots, if you don't know, is Dan's like creator-owned miniseries, which is offered up by Image or offered up through Image. And if you don't know what it is, that's okay. Neither does anybody else. But Dan seems to think that is the ticket to ride for him. You know what I mean? He believes that that's the thing that'll get him into. He opens with that sometimes. You know, have you heard of Slots? My name is Dan Panosian. You know,
right?
He says it just like that.
I'm Dan Slots Panosian.
Dan Slots Panosian.
Well,
it is to say that he should be on here. It'd be so much fun to have him on.
I would love to have him on. I'll next week, maybe we could set one up with him.
Yeah, let's see how that works out.
Yeah,
well, as soon as we get through these, I'll give him a buzz and see what's going on with him.
That would be great. I think we would all do well with that.
Yeah.
Did this podcast he was on, did that come about from San Diego?
I don't know. I don't know if, a lot of different people, Perch has a lot of great friends, friendships, professional and also personal in the comic book industry. He used to be a former retailer. Now he's got this really super popular YouTube channel, and he really does say. I've done an interview on his show.
Oh, okay, okay.
So I mean, he's always kept his identity private, right? He rarely, back in the day when he was streaming on Fridays, and you know what? He drank on Fridays too. It's weird. Like on his live shows that go on for about an hour and a half, he would drink, and he'd invite his guests to drink, and I didn't drink that much, or I drink at all. It is to say, there's a common thread here, but. Really good guy. He's into comics. He loves the idea of mainstream comics in particular. He has his insight and opinions about how to fix it because he really is convinced that it is not operating as a real business right now. And because of that criticism, he is often called every name in the book. I think the comic book industry has a tendency to, they never want, because it inherently, and this makes sense, it's inherently about relationships, right, that you keep in order to continue your tenure there. You and I have talked about this a handful of times. Rare is it ever, at least these days, rare is it about actual merit, right? It's about the secret handshakes that you know. And so even though anybody with a clear thinking, level-headed brain can see how inefficiently it's running, and I'm being very generous by that description. Nobody will ever call them out on it. Just, I mean, and the moment from the fan perspective, if you say that, if you go like, why are these books so underwhelming? Why aren't these any good? So, they'll just dogpile and find ways to say that you're, just whatever derogatory thing that they can call you in order to dismiss you and effectively dehumanize you,
Right.
But from a professional standpoint, say again?
I said I want to circle back to that because I've been thinking about that too, but go ahead.
Yeah, but from a professional's perspective, I mean, I know plenty of pros that I've spoken to offline, and I would mention this. I would get into the vein of the spirit of this conversation that, like, there's like people in those offices that are just not operating, and they've been in the industry for decades, and maybe that could be weaponized against them.
Mm-hmm.
But they're like, I'd mention it. I say, there's people in those offices that used to be the offices to get into. You'd make a special drive down to New York in order to go and make FaceTime with those people, potentially hang out with them for lunch. A big deal.
Right.
And like, oh yeah, no, I know that. Those guys are idiots. This so and so is just intolerable. That's just such a, that guy's an idiot.
Mm-hmm.
And I go like, oh, but you never mention it. And you're like, dude, I don't want to get dogpiled on. I don't want to.
Right.
I don't need that extra headache. I think one term was used. I don't need the extra headache. And it really did. That wasn't the thing that solidified it in my head, but it added on to the pile where I'm like, why would you be afraid of that person? Like, why would you care whether or not? And one is clearly because they still are at the teat of the mainstream comic book industry. They're gonna be on both knees saying thank you very much, whatever gets handed out to them. But also, I think we've given a lot of undue power.
Yes.
To a bunch of dum-dums on the internet.
Yes.
That
You're
don't
right about
have
that.
any bearing on whether or not a business is going to do well. And it should not have any bearing on the legitimacy of the comment, right?
Right.
Especially when it comes from a learned place. Now, I understand there's times when, the random person online will say something and you're like, oh, everybody can have an opinion, but that's not coming from a informed place. That's just coming from like an outside looking in. And yeah, sure, sometimes it's accurate, and unnervingly so. But when it comes to a pro saying it and they say, hey, that's broken, you should fix it, I'm wondering why they don't say it often enough, especially that sort of, I wonder why they don't speak truth to power. I'm always curious about that. And the more I talk about it with people, or at least of those who I've spoken to, of those who would care not to, be public about their condescending opinion, a lot of it has to do with the added headache of the internet coming down on top of their heads. And I'm like, you can turn that off.
Yeah, what you said is exactly right. We have people hand over power. There's no real power there. Mm-hmm. It's a perceived power because people are scared. It's a bark.
Yeah.
There's nothing beyond the bark. So if you let the bark control you, it's silly, because if you just didn't listen to the bark, nothing would happen.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a weird phenomenon that I wish I could read more into. I think there is I forgot who the author was, but there's this book called The Madness of Crowds that I've been meaning to lean into a little bit to have a better understanding of.
I've been curious about reading some herd mentality stuff myself.
Yeah, to understand number one, where it comes from. I think a good lot of it is, you just go along to get along. I have a person that I know who they say something like, oh, what does it really matter? It's just easier to go along. It's like, oh,
that's a bad way to be.
What does it really take? What does it, what's, how much trouble can it really be? Just, get along with it, right?
Right.
But that has an invisible, maybe not invisible, but that is like unintended slippery slope.
Yeah.
That's associated with that.
It definitely is.
Because it enables and empowers dum-dums to do it even more so.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And by the way, this does not diminish that there are some people who go online and act a fool and people jump down their throats. And I'm like, you had that coming because you're acting like an idiot, The internet should not be consequence-free. However, there are plenty of times when that kind of rhetoric, that kind of action takes away the legitimacy of something that has a lot of value to it,
right?
Just because there's an online activism happening,
Yeah, and but it only exists online. It never goes beyond that.
Sure.
It's these a lot of these people who lead these charges online in their private life have nothing to do with activism of any kind.
Sure.
It's just
Sure.
like on Twitter, I can just say this and I'll just go back to work. Like you
Yeah.
really like
Well,
you're really fighting for equality there. Like, you sent out a
right.
tweet, you go.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So
Because I mean,
yeah,
it's the most energy free level of
yeah,
engagement. You know what I
yeah.
mean? You spend
And
whatever how
they
many
act like
calories it takes you.
and
Press like 180
but
calories
all
or
the
whatever.
virtue signaling behind it, it's like they act as if like they are taking a stance and they believe in this, but they do nothing except send a tweet.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
but I
like
mean,
it's all a
I'm
show.
not. Yeah, I'm not gonna take anything away from the fact that they believe in it. But I believe that if you genuinely do have something to say about it, if you genuinely do have like, there's more things that you can do than just
Well,
sit on
that's my
Twitter and
point.
yeah,
I generally believe we should deal with homelessness a little better in this country.
yeah,
But
sure,
so if I were to simply just send a tweet, it's like doing nothing. But to
yes,
hide
yeah,
behind the virtue of, well, I believe in this because I tweeted about it is insane.
yes,
It's like, well,
yeah,
go down. Are you down at the soup kitchen? Are you helping out? Are you involved with local government? Like, are you doing anything?
right.
And the answer is no. Then you're
Rarely
not
is it ever
really doing
yes.
anything. You're not really fighting the cause.
Yeah, yeah. Huh. Anyway, how did we get down that path?
I want to say Dan Panosian led us down that path.
I don't like
We
Dan
can just
Panosian.
blame him for everything now.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's independent of
It
Dan,
was
but there.
because of the podcaster. You were saying they speak their mind about the comic book
Yes,
industry.
right. And so, Perch often gets beat up for bringing something to light that makes a whole lot of sense to a lot of different people. But unfortunately, because it's not very popular, if he's calling out specific creators who are unable to do um, unable to do their jobs well, and yet are celebrated, and again, like, taste is so subjective, but
Sure.
there are certain pillars in place that allow for a story to be um, there's like a category that's, I believe, pretty universal for you to understand, like, is this good or is this bad? you know
Mm-hmm.
and I think those things are pretty straightforward and obvious.
Sure.
And again, if we were to base a lot of the hiring methods in those spaces based on merit, they wouldn't they wouldn't have as long a tenure there as they have been. But that's not the main if it's a consideration at all, it's not the main consideration anymore.
Right.
And so that's why I'm like, oh right, so that's why Perch he gets a lot of grief, because he's still of the school of like, why are you here? What are you
Right.
doing to contribute to the legacy of this thing that you've taken on, this formerly destination thing that, number one, as artists or as creatives used to covet. Number two, as readers, it used to be the high bar.
Right.
And yeah, it's pretty fascinating. I think he was on there talking. Dan Panosian was talking to Perch, and I just know that I listened to about all of 10 minutes of the conversation. It was like, yeah, this is boilerplate stuff that Dan is talking about, but it wasn't any less engaging. It was pretty dang entertaining.
Yeah,
But I
Dan can
do
be
know that,
entertaining no matter
y-
what.
yeah, yeah, that guy knows how to carry a conversation. But I do know that there's some things that you leave off of these kinds of podcasts, these kinds of interviews, because you don't want to catch a ton of, you want to have a ton of bricks
Well,
land on top of your head.
that's what happened on my podcast. I would push a little bit when we'd hit those areas, and he wouldn't go
Yeah,
down that road. And then
yeah.
if he said one little thing, he'd be like, I don't know, I said that. Is that bad?" And like, we can do it again, Dan. We can do it again. But that wasn't that wasn't exclusive to Dan.
Sure,
That
sure.
happened a few times with people.
Yeah, I think there's a line of professionalism that you have to toe, right? Because that's what you are. Um, um, but there's also a threshold. There's also like a line that you can go right up to before crossing it into unprofessionalism, right?
Sure, and you can
Um,
speak critically of something, whether it's a piece of work or the way a company's run, and
Sure.
that's not unprofessional.
I wouldn't think so.
No,
But
but
you and I are on this side of the fence about that,
right, right,
because everything, when you make a comment like that, everything gets compounded into why is that company running poorly, right?
right.
And when you cite certain things of why that thing isn't, optimized for success, you naturally have to point at certain individuals, and that suddenly becomes an attack, because everything is an attack now. Everything's like
Right. And we
to people.
also, one thing I said when I said I want to circle back to it, one thing I'm noticing is, there was a thing Liefeld said this week, and I
Yeah.
don't think he was wrong in what he said.
What do
And
you
this
say?
was his experience and his opinion.
Yep.
And I just see post after post of people just, blasting back instead of like thinking on it, letting it sink in. And maybe you're part of that generation, but maybe you're blasting back because you feel some truth behind it. It just feels like we can't speak critically of anything anymore.
Right. Right.
If you're worried about that backlash on the internet, people won't speak critically of anything. Like,
Right.
if you were to like speak critically of take like let's say we did an episode where we looked at all the covers that week and we did a critical, not an opinion, a critical analysis of the works,
Yes.
that there would be people retaliating instead of being like, oh, maybe we could all learn from this.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and and that is a scary place for me. I mean, I we came up in a critical environment where, when you put something out, it was open to criticism from the art community, and as
Sure.
it should be, and you learn from
Sure.
that. And uh, we just live in a time where this, and I remember as a teacher, I saw this happening. Critiques all of a sudden became very personal, and Klaus and I had a long conversation about it because he's dealing with it now.
Yeah.
Where,
Sure.
like, when you lead a critique in an art classroom, these kids aren't open to it. This
Huh.
younger generation, it's a personal attack, and
Sure.
they argue the teacher, and the other students will get behind the student that's under critique
Hmm.
and defend them. And it's, as a teacher, you're just like, well, what do I do with this? Are you here to learn?
Right.
If
Right.
50
Right.
students are telling me they all agree that the thing the one student did wrong is okay, it doesn't make it okay. It's still wrong.
Right. Right.
We're talking about Klaus Janson. He knows what he's talking about.
Yeah. I would. I
So
would bet pretty good money that Klaus Janson is on top of things.
yeah, but he's having a rough time as a teacher
Huh.
now.
Yeah.
It
There's a
was
lot
really
of things to
sad
think
to hear.
about. There's a lot of things to think about when you're. Let's go back to the Rob Liefeld thing.
Yeah, yeah,
I think
okay.
number one, Rob as an entity, right, is pretty incendiary. So we have to consider the source, right?
Sure,
Rob
sure.
Liefeld is like, if Rob opens his mouth to anything. By the way, this isn't like a slight against him. It's just, it's just who he's become. I have a ton of respect for him. I have
Sure, I do
not
too.
just of him as a sort of like a businessman, but obviously as a creator who's managed to continue to extend his career as an
Yeah,
artist in comics, right? So
for sure.
I have an appreciation for him. I've worked with
I
him,
do
so
too.
keep in mind that these opinions are biased. But this was back in the, like, I was caught under that same sort of how would you say, like, that sort of, like, maybe it was not so obvious jealousy, not so coming from a really sort of like on the outside looking in and overly critical of one specific portion of his, like, of his accomplishments, right?
Hmm.
It's like anytime that I hear some guy talk about Rob's anatomy,
Hmm.
I'm like, come up with something else, will you?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah,
that's tired shit that's been around for so long.
yeah.
Like, and you're digging up an image from 10, 15 years ago. And who's to say that he's, it's up to you to decide whether or not he's gotten better since then. But, like, you're digging up an old image. Who cares?
Right,
And most
right.
importantly, if all things were the same, if clearly all things were being measured and then rewarded based on merit, then he's the least of your he's the he's the least of the perpetrators that's being allowed to work today.
Exactly.
And on top of that, the added layer is like, but he's still working, so go cry your tears someplace else. You know what I mean? Like,
Right. Right.
you can talk all the shit that you want, but it just sounds like you're bitter
That's
that
exactly.
he
It's
can work
jealousy.
and
Right.
you're not
I
getting
mean,
attention.
the two things I would say to my students when I'd walk in and they were clowning on someone like Reifeld, I'd be like, A, he got the job. B, he got it done.
All right.
Until you do that, you can't say anything.
Yeah. I don't think. I mean, clearly, just make fun of him as much as you want, but like, point is, like, there are plenty of things that the general audience, what they know of him, uh, like, there's a reason why they react the way they did to Rob, right? And it's not unique to that one statement. It's like everything, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I drew something with, I inked something for him on this Snake Eyes book, and he's like, "Oh, good thing you don't have to ink like, oh, I can see that he didn't draw any feet again," or something like that, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, yeah. Jeez, Louise, it's like tired, you know. It's like,
Right.
so. What else are you gonna talk about? We've heard the joke over and over again to the point where it's
But
like
that's
not
that
even funny anymore.
tribalism. That's the
Yeah.
tribalism where it's like, look, I said it too. I'm one of you guys. I'm
Right.
part of the
Right.
team.
Look how deep my thinking is. I said
Right.
something that bazillion other people have said.
Mm-hmm.
And so going back to the message now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just layered on top of the fact that Rob is very incendiary. The message is anti everything. To in the spirit of what you're talking about, the message is anti everything that's happening, in as far as merit is concerned now. I don't know the entire story. Obviously, that's just like Rob's side of the story. But
Right.
let's take it at face value, right? I'm not surprised.
Right.
At face value, I'm not surprised that he asked, whoever it is that he took on, what, like, how did he phrase it? Did he say that these people ended up arguing with him more than?
They were more argumentative.
Okay.
They were not receptive to feedback. They were not receptive to. They were very entitled.
That's a
Um,
broad word, though, right?
yeah. But that's where I don't think. It may be the way he says things could be better, but
Sure.
I don't.
Yeah.
I don't disagree from what I've seen of a younger generation, and of course, it's not applied to everyone. I mean,
Yeah.
you've got
I
a
was gonna
kid like
say.
Kreese who defies everything we're talking
Oh
about.
yeah. Yeah, for
But
sure. And yeah, I'm going to guess it is a. So when he made that connection, the point is when he made that connection that it was a specific age group, I go like, I disagree, right? Because I work with plenty of people in that age group in some capacity, right?
hmm
That is
hmm
counter to his experience,
right,
right?
okay,
I think it has a lot to do, so it's weird to sort of like blanket statement that everybody in that age group is,
yeah,
acts that
yeah.
way. I think
So
what
maybe
ends
it's
up happening is that you don't vet your personnel enough, you
right.
know?
It could also
Like,
be, I mean, the way your like the concept art industry works is very different. I mean, comics is kind of the Wild West, and a lot of these people coming in are like social media sensations,
sure,
and they build this ecosystem of their own on social media,
sure,
and therefore they have this entitlement and they have
sure.
these different ways of being that may be different than the concept world. Maybe I'm guessing.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a pretty good guess. I'm talking now from the 10,000 foot view, sort of like one level above that. I think that knowing full well that you are in the Wild West scenario that you're talking about in comics, I think it now starts to become a little. You have to do a little bit more digging, a little bit more vetting before
Yeah,
you
yeah,
bring
you're
these
absolutely
people
right
on.
there. Absolutely right.
So yeah, I feel bad for Rob's situation, and I feel bad that there are really hardworking people, people in that generation that are trying to catch a break, and it's unfortunate that they are accidentally painted by the experience of these, seemingly entitled entitled artists, because
Right, right,
it could
right.
just be exactly as you said, which is like Rob saw them, found them somewhere because they were so big, they were so like celebrated online, and
Hmm.
the internet has a just rewards sensationalism like you wouldn't believe, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Rob saw that and said, "Hey, let me hire that person on," not really understanding the personality type. I can speak not in detail, but I know of a generation of storyboard artists that Warner Brothers Animation brought on because of their notoriety. This was back when DeviantArt was still relevant.
Hmm.
They got brought on because they were like hot shit on DeviantArt, and you put them in a corporate environment or in an environment in which performance is really the main, like it's really sort of like highlighted, you know,
Hmm.
and they couldn't hack it, right? Because it was not an ecosystem that they would thrive in. The space that they the space the space that they inhabit the most is one that they've made for themselves. You know what I mean?
Right, right. You're right, Eric.
Hello. Sorry, I'm turning the system off because my my system is going crazy in the
Oh, okay.
house.
What system in the house?
Yeah, there's a what do you call it? There's a climate control in the house,
Mm.
and every time that somebody messes with it, right, it kicks on. And I think my kid found the little dial in his room.
Oh man, I remember my kids. They still do it. I lose my shit sometimes. I'll come home and like the AC's on 65, and I'm like, "What the fuck are you doing?" Then I get a $300 electric bill next month. We were cold.
sorry, sorry about the interruption. Anyway,
No, it's fine.
it's it's easy to get hung up on a generation that seemingly especially now, like anytime that there's somebody that comes around that acts a fool, they're highlighted in the worst and best way possible.
Mm-hmm.
But then to blanket paint them into that space, I think I'm not saying that Rob's assessment was wrong, right?
Right.
That
I think his
he made
experience was real.
absolutely, yeah, like if he sees that the connective tissue is like the individual's age, that's not inaccurate, right? But
Right.
I don't think all of them are like that. I think
Right.
that
Right. Right.
he just picked a couple of dum dums and gave them an opportunity,
Right.
and now they don't have that opportunity anymore. So
Right. And
good for
now,
him.
and yeah, I mean, this is the difficulty with social media is the dum dums get a voice.
Right, right, and
And
that's something else altogether. Like everybody is given voice, and sometimes those voices are not tempered by like, wait a second, who are you? Like
right.
like nobody ever bothers asking, why are you talking about rocket science right now? You've never even worked in the
Yeah. What do you
industry.
know? Right. Right.
you
What do
know
you know of this?
you've never built a rocket before. It's
But
just
in
like some
turn, the
guy.
damage that's done is the people who are experts in their corresponding fields are stripped of of their prestige almost in a
Yeah,
lot of ways. And that's a hard one for me to get past.
yeah, yeah. I don't know. I always think like, where is it doing the most damage? And like, I feel for you. I feel for Klaus. I feel for the educators who are trying to do their best in sort of like putting the mentorship time in. In trying to help people find a space of growth or opportunity for growth. But I think what ends up accidentally happening, and we don't see it, you just said it before, where he's like, Klaus is concerned about that sort of, hey, I'll tell you this is wrong because it looks like, you should be doing it more like this. And then they push back for whatever reason, right? And you go like, oh, there was an opportunity to learn there.
Right.
And because of this current environment of like, well, everyone's equal and everyone is special and everyone is,
Right.
you miss that opportunity to level yourself up because you're so busy being overprotective of this thing.
Right.
And it really is um he really is getting to the crux of like what could possibly be um yeah, that unknown, that invisible thing that's like, yeah, that's all messed up and everything, but like look at all these people who are now not getting the right sort of education,
Right. Exactly.
you
Exactly.
know.
Yeah. And and it also, I couldn't wrap my head around a bunch of students walking into a classroom taught by Klaus Janson and having absolutely no respect for him and his career, and not even knowing who he is. I mean, here you
Right.
are taking a comic book class. How do you not know who Klaus Janson is? And even if so, how did you not even just do a little bit of research before class started?
Mm.
And if so, how are you being so disrespectful to someone who has such a wealth of knowledge on a topic you want to study?
Here's a perspective that I mean, it's in line with what you're talking about, even, you know, independent of the legendary status that Klaus is in. It's clear that you're in the room and you know the premise of why you're in that room, which is I'm taking a sequential art class, and potentially parts of this, whatever they outlined for you at the beginning, part of the curriculum, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like, you know, you're going in there to try to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you not there trying to learn?
Right. Right. That's what I
That
mean.
is
Like
a
that.
that is
That's,
more of a, I think that's more of a sort of like a cultural shift that I don't
yeah.
know. Like, again, they're missing
I
out
mean,
on this
look,
opportunity.
to be fair, when I was in school,
Yeah,
there were there were those students, and when I was teaching, there were those students.
sure.
I never taught for them. I taught for the students who came in thirsty for knowledge and
There you go.
open. Like the students who walked in were like, "Here's my assignment. Tear me apart." Like, and had their notepad ready to go. It's like, okay, well, this is why we're here,
Right,
and so I'm going to teach for you. And what I'm not going to do is teach for you, the other people. But it seems like that minority is becoming more the majority,
right, right.
and that the people there to really put in the time. I see what I see is I see my I'll use my daughter as a reference point. I see in Zoe someone who has that I'm going to put in the hours um, attitude inside of her, but
Mm-hmm.
had to fight for years with herself to let it emerge because it was so foreign to life in her peer group to have that self-motivated, self-driven, put in the hours, put in the work, and blood, sweat, and tears make your shit happen, make it better.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, what I mean, there is something to be said for, yeah, when you're 15, of course, most people don't have that. You're
Sure,
15,
sure.
um, but it's at 20 now where it's starting to come out. She's now like regimented with her exercise routine, something that is new. And I'm like, and then she's seeing results. I mean, she's dramatically changed herself and she's seeing it. And I can finally say, like, all your life, I've been telling you, if you just put in the work, the rewards will come. But you're
Right,
growing up in a world where you don't see people doing that outside of your house. Um, and so I think it's like you said, generationally, that it makes it a little harder. I mean, when I was growing up, I just remember that's what you saw, people who put in the work and got somewhere from it. And I think the
right.
internet changed that for a lot of people, where you didn't necessarily have to put in the work to become a sensation on the internet. I mean, in terms of developing your skill set, for example, like TikTok.
Mm,
Well, okay, for example, on TikTok, there's a handful of artists I follow who are abysmal. I mean, we're
mm-hmm.
talking a drawing on a 15-year-old level. They're
Mm-hmm.
full grown adults with millions of followers and making a ton of money. And
Yep.
their videos are watched over and over and over as tutorials. But as tutorials, they are awful, awful.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
they're so dumbed down, people just watch them.
That's something worth considering, right? Like the fact that they are awful, and we've somehow correlated that to millions and millions of people watching them, and they're being handed out as tutorials, doesn't make their work any less awful.
No,
You know what I mean? Like it doesn't.
no, but here's
So
someone who didn't put in the work to learn to be
sure,
a much better artist and
sure.
have a very lucrative and popular career in art.
But that's anybody you call it. Like that's his. Like in history, that's happened so many freaking times
Okay.
that I'm
You
not.
don't think
You know
social
that
media makes it
that doesn't
easier for
concern
people
me.
like that? If you find a way
Well,
to
yeah, easier for sure, right? Like, but I'm talking about like just like the quality of work that they put out. Like, okay, so I think what you're trying to say is because this person is awful, and because they're being rewarded for being awful, nothing is motivating them to get better.
and the people watching it, nothing's motivating them to work harder.
Sure, yeah, I guess so, but not everybody is gonna be like not every
I'm not going to
TikTok
say
person
everyone. I'm not going to
like
say everyone.
okay. So maybe I'm conflating it a bit. It's like this person who has millions of followers as an awful artist can just be like a one off, like or can be a 10 off, can be a 20 off, right? But of the people that follow them, of the millions, not all of those people are going to be this person, and they're not going to have their millions of followers. There's going to
No.
be like 5 of these dum-dums who are like going to be really good, and as soon as they like broadcast the awful art virus and these people start taking it on, they'll come to realize like, oh, I can't be a TikTok star based on this. Like that guy has filled up that spot, and there's only so many of
Well,
those
maybe
spots that
we'll
are
get to
available.
that point where people realize this won't happen for them. But
Sure.
what I'm saying is now I think there is, you don't see a lot of people. I haven't seen. I'm not going to say everyone. I'm going to say there's a lot more people who are coming up not interested in putting in the work. No,
Huh.
knowing they can figure out a way to do it around having to put in the work.
I must be completely like, yeah, and we talked about this multiple times before. I'm like, I must be curating the hell out of my Twitter feed,
Well, I mean, I'm
my
going a
social
lot on
media feed.
what I see through my children, like their friend
Mm,
groups and what they do on social media,
sure.
and so I pay attention to that. Now, that being said, I have a handful of people who get involved with pulp instruction that are putting the time in.
I was gonna say, right? Like,
Sure.
those are the ones that I would think present the best kind of hope to every idiot that comes along and says like, I don't need foundational understanding of things work. So like, to your point earlier, if there are kids in Klaus's class that are just all about like telling Klaus to his face that he's wrong, especially if he's the instructor in the room, I hope that's similar to you. Klaus goes, well, I'm not teaching for you, right? I'm teaching
Well,
for.
I think it's become, when I spoke to Klaus, it seems it's become overwhelming, and it's wearing him down.
I bet. I mean,
He's
I can't imagine.
yeah.
Yeah, I know there's from my personal experience, yes, you're not inaccurate. There's more than a handful of people out there who are I don't know, from a subjective perspective, undeserved of the kind of clout that they get online. But it's like online clout is so easy to get, online
Right,
clout
but
is like it's
do
almost
you,
formulaic. It's to your point.
sure.
If it's that person is now leveraging that clout to get the opportunities that people who have been busting their butts, who are actually objectively good at their craft, yeah, that's when I'm all like, eh. That they're really. That's when I take
Sure.
exception to be like, that's stupid. That sucks. There's
Right.
no way you should
But
be getting that
we
job.
we both agreed that the general quality of the art in the books being put out at, say, Marvel and DC has dipped quite a bit. And
Yes.
true, there's other
Yeah.
factors involved there,
Yeah.
but I think that's part of it too.
What? There's nothing out there that are exceptional. And no, I disagree with that.
No, no, that's not what I'm saying.
What do you say?
I'm saying that they will be hired because they have learned to cultivate an ecosystem through social media. And it's not necessarily their work is of the quality needed.
I I'm gonna have to think about that for a
Okay.
little bit.
Okay.
But right now, my attitude towards that is there's plenty of people who are a lot more brand appropriate who have also cultivated an ecosystem
Yeah,
of
that's true.
popularity,
That's
right?
true.
But they don't get those opportunities in mainstream comics because at the end of the day, that's not what those leadership positions are looking for,
Okay. That's fair.
right? So it definitely has a lot to do with taste. And I would argue that the current stewardship at Marvel and DC, or these books that had a high level of craft when it comes to illustration and drawing and sequential storytelling, a lot of these people who are making those hirings don't know what they're doing.
Well, that's very yeah. That's very
So,
true too.
like even independent of these illustrators who cultivate a cult following or like a popular following, they sort of like build an ecosystem of people who are huge fans of their work. I have a level of appreciation for that. Should
Yeah,
they
I
all
do too.
get shots at Marvel? I don't think so. You
Right.
know, like there's no reason for you to be in that. Like there's no reason for you to be doing that kind of book because that thing is not. When it comes to an understanding of what that thing is, uh, your style is not made for it.
Right.
And if somebody like I already know, I can already hear the voices of people who would be like, well, who are you to say that who's not made for it? And I'm like, I don't have to say anything. I can bring up 15 omnibuses that show exactly the kinds of styles that have been on this
Exactly.
book, and this is not it. Even if and it's not even talking about like how it ends up dating itself. We're just talking about the kind of stories that are being told in these spaces, and this definitely is not it. Well, it allows for growth. You should allow for growth. You should allow for. I'm like, I am on board for like expanding the definition of what it means, but at its core, it's always going to be this. There should be a core understanding, a core truth for that particular lineup, those particular characters, that particular whatever. And when you don't have the smart stewardship to continue what that core truth is, that's the reason why the filtration system gets that much more wide. It gets wider. Now everybody can do it, when they
Right.
shouldn't. They just shouldn't. It's as if you were trying to tell me, well, historically, if Disney understands the brand that is Mickey Mouse,
Right.
they understand it. In the years that you've seen it, they've been deliberate about how they grow Mickey Mouse to where he was to like our understanding of him now. If you look online, you can see the comparisons of him over the decades, right? Different iterations of him over the decades. But it was slow, it was deliberate, but at the end of the day, they understood the core truth that is Mickey Mouse. The moment you start putting gums and teeth on him, the moment you start like putting anything on him that's outside of the current understanding of the brand, because they know it's so powerful that they maintain that brand identity, they don't like, no, there's no reason for us to do that. You see what Mickey Mouse looked like in the 70s versus he is now,
Hmm.
Like there's clear changes, but it was like almost invisible when they did it. But at
Right.
the end of the day, that thing still registers as Mickey Mouse. We're just going to talk visually, not even narratively.
Right. Right.
So they understand what Mickey Mouse is all about. I don't think there's enough visually smart people at Marvel to understand what any of those characters are about right now.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. You're right
especially in
about
those
that.
premiere books, to be like, okay, yeah, that's what definitely what it looks like. This is definitely the style that we're going for. This is definitely the look. Or this is the elevated, escalated version of this look. You know,
Hmm.
but definitely, this is an evolution of that.
I was on the line of this. I had a panel over the weekend at the con, and they put on the panel. Carl Potts was on it with me, and so I kind of just really turned it into like stories of Carl coming up, and there were so many instances of people at Marvel teaching him along the way
Mm-hmm.
that the conversation turned to that is just gone now,
Mm.
and
Mm.
that's a problem.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Every successful, I don't know of any successful space that continues to be successful if they don't have a clear understanding of what their culture is.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that that culture can't be added on to. Like things generationally have a tendency to change and expand and grow, and your periphery gets broader. But at the end of the day, you have to understand who you are. I often look to sports teams when I think about those kinds of culture, right? When you have a culture of winning, it's rare that that culture of winning suddenly just like disappears, you know?
Right.
And it's
Right.
because organizationally they do everything that they can to continue that culture moving forward, allowing for nuances to be incorporated into that culture. But at the end of the day, that team knows how to win. You know,
Yeah.
they maintain that winning. They maintain that. There's a reason why, even during its down years, an organization like the Los Angeles Lakers, a basketball team, were still thought of as a premier team, even though they weren't winning championships, right?
Hmm.
There's a reason why. It's because inherently in their program, in their organization, and in their culture, they have a very high standard. Yeah, sure, there's dry spells for sure.
Hmm.
There's dry
Hmm.
spells in get because it's not just about culture. Obviously, you still need to populate your roster with the right sort of basketball players. But you have a culturally you have a winning formula of how to pick those players out of a lineup. You know,
Right.
and when you don't pass that on, right? When you don't hand over that legacy of how to pick winners, right? And most importantly, how to like, and that includes everything from like the eyeball of how to do it, what we do here in order for us to continue quote unquote winning.
Hmm.
That's when you sort of let your guard down, and next thing you know, people are like rebelling against you, and that's why you lose. That's how you lose your audience. That's why you're like, oh, you guys used to be a championship organization. No, now you can't get people to walk into your arena or your stadium or your whatever,
Hmm.
or your industry. That's why. Perch makes a very good point, and I don't know if this is sort of a chicken or the egg kind of a thing, right? Like he makes the argument that comics needs to be a destination,
Yeah.
and it's implied that because that it's not. Excuse me. And one of the things that you can do in order to help that be a destination is you need to actually give competitive rates. You know,
Sure.
rather
Sure.
so most people who come into the comic book industry realize that it's like, well, you're not going to get paid much while you're there, so I'm just going to make that a stop to wherever else I ultimately want to go so that I can get paid and actually make a living off of it, right?
Right. Right. Right.
Makes total sense to me. The chicken and the egg part is like it's going to be difficult for it to actually be a competitive place for employment when it's not being considered by the outside world and more ironically by the inside world as a real business.
Right.
There's no
Absolutely.
metrics in place for them to understand what a
Well,
real business looks like.
to bring
Um,
everything around to what you just said and what I was saying earlier, you do have these social media sort of sensations that get invited into comics to work. They don't even want to be here,
sure,
and
sure,
they don't have an understanding of the craft of this medium at all,
sure.
and their work is celebrated, and eventually I guess they'll leave, but it's like I couldn't imagine this industry being a place where people didn't want to be here are the superstars.
Wait, say that again.
People like coming up in the comics, it was very clear to me that if you want to work in this, you better get serious about this, and you are amongst the hordes of people that want to work here. So you're going to have to toughen yourself, learn this craft, become good in order to get in.
Sure.
And now you
Sure.
just have people who aren't even seeking to get in, invited in through a publisher, an editor, or whatever, because they were noticed online and have an active following, a large active following.
Right.
And
Right.
so they come in, they're celebrated very fast, and they make some good money very quickly, but they don't have any reason to learn how to do this, and they never wanted to learn to do it. And I'm
I see what
seeing
you mean.
that as a pattern. And it's not just one person now. It's a handful of people it's happened with, and it's
Right.
continuing to happen.
Right. Right. Because to your point, right, like super early in the conversation, it's that slippery slope, right? Like the moment you let one person do it, right, you start realize, and then they realize, oh, wait a second, this isn't actually a line that I'm not allowed to cross. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
and they'll just cross it over and over again. There's got to be a certain set of guidelines that people have an understanding and respect for, and there needs to be a stewardship that continues to uphold those guidelines. But right now, I don't believe in any of the leadership. 0%
Yeah.
in any of it.
And I
Because
don't fault the artists that are being given these opportunities and
sure,
taking it.
why wouldn't you? Like,
Well,
by
right.
like,
It's not their fault, and it's not their, and they never wanted to learn this, so why would they want to learn it now? That's not on them.
sure.
But if the
But it's different
industry,
in the case of like Klaus's class, right? Like
right.
they went in there specifically to learn, and when Klaus is giving them, you know, his learned knowledge from however long he's been working in the industry, they push back. I think that's kind of stupid, you know.
Yeah,
But I do
agree.
understand where you're coming from when it comes to like going into an industry without sort of like having the understanding that we are going to build you into the ideal person, the ideal artist, the ideal creative for this book. Instead, they're handed over the reins and like, what's your incentive to learn at that point? You know?
Right, right.
You're getting
And
paid bottom of
you
the
do
barrel
that enough
money.
times, the craft suffers. The
I agree.
medium suffers.
I agree. Well, that's a downer to end the episode on, but that's pretty good.
Okay. We'll do another one.
We'll do
And
another
that one might be a downer too. Who knows?
Yeah, we'll just keep going down this downer trend this week. All right, let's take a break.
All right.
All right.